Hello, Dr. Ken. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
Really appreciate everybody who will be watching this particular episode with us. Thank you all
Okay.
for joining us. So let me
Well, it's
set
very
the
nice talking to
context.
you.
As the climate crisis accelerates, cities are facing mounting challenges: rapid
Right.
urbanization, resource depletion, biodiversity loss, and rising vulnerability to natural disasters. Traditional urban planning models often prioritize density and infrastructure at the expense of ecology, leading to unsustainable growth. To secure a livable future, we must rethink cities as ecosystems, places where human activity coexists with natural systems. We are honored to have Dr. Ken Yeang, globally recognized architect, ecologist, pioneer of ecological design, and recipient of the Frost and Sullivan Institute's Visionary Leadership Best Practices recognition. Over 5 decades, Dr. Yeang has shaped and designed philosophy that integrates biodiversity, climate responsive architecture, and ecological master planning. His groundbreaking projects, from bioclimatic skyscrapers to eco master plans across Asia and beyond, demonstrate how cities can be designed as living systems. In our session today, Master Planning for Ecology, Sustainable Cities of the Future, we will explore how ecological principles can be embedded into urban design and what it takes to move beyond sustainability towards true ecological integration and actionable strategies for shaping resilient, future ready cities. So, once again, Dr. Yang, I thank you very much for joining us today. And I wanted to start by asking you, what do you believe ecology must do in terms of center of urban planning? And what are some common misconceptions people have about eco cities or green buildings?
Well, let me start with misconceptions. The first misconception is o- that our society has to grow all the time. Why must we grow all the time? It is growth that is the cause of the mental disruption. We want more and more and more. More money, more profit, more development, more artifacts for ourselves. We don't need all that. So we have to change our lifestyle and our mindset. We don't need to grow all the time. Enough is enough, right? I have only 3 shirts, 4 sets of underwear, 3 T-shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, 2 white shirts, and that's it. I don't need any more. But if you keep one more, that's what marketing does. They want people, you want to buy more products. They seduce you by buying more jackets, more clothes, more suits. Be happy what you got. So that's the first misconception. Okay, let's try and change our mindset. Now, as an architect, I can't change people's mindset. It's not my job. It's the influencers, people like yourselves, have a true ethics for sustainability. Then the planet will be heading towards a sustainable future. So we will start with people. So mindset, because the biggest problem is not ecology, it's not systems, it's not built environment, but it's us as people and our lifestyles. Okay. The second thing is the things that we do. Why do we need to work for a resilient and a planet? We do it not because of commercial reasons. You talk to a banker, you talk to a developer, talk to a businessman. He says, "Why should I do it? There's no money in it for me." Of course, I try to explain to a lot of clients. I said, "Well, if you do sustainable design, you have energy savings and cost savings." We did a green building based on local standards of green. We did one project in Singapore, and the cost of making it green is 6.5% of industry standard for that building type. But the energy and cost savings from our design amortizes the cost over 5 years, right? And so, that after 5 years, you continue to get that saving. So that is the commercial reason for doing green buildings, which is cost and energy savings, because you tell them, oh, you increase biodiversity, it's good for the climate, good for this. People will say it's bullshit. Where's proof? But if you have actually show cost and energy savings, you can calculate that justify that. So the third misconception is that why should I do it? We do it because for ethical reasons. We do it because it's the right thing to do, it's good for the planet. So we do it because we're concerned for the planet, not just for our planet, but for our next generation and the generation after that they have to continue to survive and live in a healthy, healing, and a planet with enhances their well-being. So that is the reason. That is the third misconception. The third misconception is that, why should we do green design? So we tell people we do green design. Yes, it is part of something we do, as architect and designer do. But the first, most important thing we design is to make people happy. That is the purpose of all architecture. I was in Russia about some time back, and then there was a huge conference, and they were discussing, oh, what should be the future of architecture for Russia? Should it be deconstructivist? Could it be modernist? Could it be traditional? So everybody gave their opinion. When it came to me, I said, it doesn't matter what it looks like. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what other people look like, because everybody wants to look the way they want to look. But the most important aspect of architecture is to increase human well-being and make people happy. If we're able to increase people's well-being and make them happy, the whole purpose of architecture is fulfilled. So those are misconceptions. Now, the next thing comes ecology. People talk about climate change, talk about this, 40% of climate change is caused by buildings, the way it's constructed, where the materials come from, and the activities that take place. So we are the architects. We are the authors of this disaster, right? If we're the authors of this disaster, we have to be the authors of its recovery. That is the purpose of being an architect. What does what we need to do today, and addressing the environmental crisis is the most compelling issue that every architect and designer and planner has to address today. If you sure there are other things to be done, the placemaking, as I said, making people happy, but whatever we do, it has to contribute not just to have least impact, not to not to have just positive, not to have no impact, but we have to design to enhance positively the ecology of the planet. That means enhance its biodiversity, enhance its performance, rather than detract from it. And so that's the purpose of design. Now, what is the baseline that ascertains the health of the planet? It's very simple. It's the ecology. And so ecology has to be, so design has to start with ecology, has to start with understanding what it means. Now, if you don't understand ecology, if you're not eco-literate, then you think you can do anything you want. But every action has a reaction. So on the planet, so we have to understand what ecology, because if you look out in your window now, you see grass, you see some trees. You hear I just see grass and trees. But actually, within the grass and the trees and the soils, there are very complex processes that take place. But you do not understand the processes until you study ecology, and then you think you can plonk any building on the site, remove the soil, remove the plants, remove everything else, and we just put our foundation and put our basement, whatever it is, they'll all be fine. No, everything we do on the land has an ecology impact. So, but you wouldn't understand that until you study ecology, until you appreciate what takes place. So that's the reason why ecology has to be the center of everything that we design and we do and we build, and not just that, but also the processes that take place. And when processes take place means you have inputs and outputs. Outputs means the emissions, the waste, the rubbish and the gases and the particulates that we discharge into the environment. It says we throw it away. Remember the word away?
Right,
But in
yes.
nature, there is no away. It's a closed system.
Yeah.
Once it grows in the biosphere, so we have to look at that design in terms of a life cycle that whatever we use, we have to reuse and recycle. If we cannot reuse and recycle, and that at the end of its useful life, we have to reintegrate back into the environment rather than accumulate. Otherwise, it goes to a landfill, it just piles up, and then you have more and more and more landfills. So we have to look at design and everything else as a life cycle. From the time you take from the end, from the site, the time you produce the material, the time you construct, operate, the building, and then you renovate it. And what happens when you add its useful life? You recycle it, you reuse it. But now the next thing you need to do is that to facilitate this, you should design for what I call disassembly. Easy to take apart and easy to use again. Now, that's easier said than done, and that is the challenge of ecological design.
Fantastic. No, I've learned so much with this response that you've just given me in so many different ways. Of course, starting by saying that the architects are the ones responsible for creating it. Hopefully, they're the ones who will come up with a solution for this. So, if you just continue with that thought from your perspective, how would you define ecological master planning, and how, from your perspective, does it differ from conventional sustainability approaches? I kind of get a little sense of it, but a little further explanation might be helpful.
Well, we have to design to have not just minimal impact, not with no impact, but with positive impact. So minimal and no impact means you have to understand with planning, you have to understand the ecology of the land before you put anything upon it. It's not just a land you can just clear, remove the vegetation, remove the soil, remove the building. So that's the first thing. That's what eco planning means. Understand the ecology of its location. And because each location is different, ecology, the location of where you're at now is different from the one 2 miles down the road. The soil is different, the vegetation is different, the species that live there are different. So you have to start by looking at the ecology of the land. If what you do affects the ecology significantly, and what you do, you should do it in such a way that it is not irreversible. You can repair it, you can regenerate it. That's what it is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that what human beings do when they do planning or they build something on the land, they chop it up, putting impervious surfaces, they put fences, they put drainage, they put roads. That's like turning a cow into a burger, then you eat it. So try and have ecological continuity when you do planning. Because in nature, everything's connected. All the soils are connected, the vegetation is connected, the species move from one part to another part of that locality. But if you put impervious surfaces, means surfaces on the ground, means the rainwater that falls on the ground goes in impervious surfaces, it goes to the drains goes to the river, then it's gone forever. So we should try and another aspect of eco-master planning is looking at the hydrology of the site. What is the natural drainage? Where does the water go? Because in nature, the water that falls on the land stays in the land. But what do we do? As I said, it goes impervious, it goes to drains, goes to rivers, it goes to the sea, it's gone forever. So we should try and keep the water in the land. So we look at ecology, we look at the species that we try and conserve and try and enhance their biodiversity. And there are ways of doing this by design and planning. Second is to look at the soils and look at the hydrology, try to keep the water in the land. The third in eco master planning is look at energy,
Energy, yeah.
right? So ecological design is not just designing a building. You have to look at the infrastructure. Where does the energy come from? What is the grid? The grid comes from a power station. How does the power station produce energy? It burns fossil fuels. If you continue to do this, then in time, it will run out of fossil fuels. And on top of that, when you burn coal, it makes emissions into the air, which pollutes the air. So we have to look at the energy in eco-master planning and try and use renewable resources, right? So if you use photovoltaics, but then, you find that photovoltaics, depending on location, the area of the photovoltaic is important. Usually the area for photovoltaic is about 58% of the gross floor area. So that means it totally changes the shape of your building, changes the way you plan, because you've got to have areas you have to receive photovoltaics to generate the energy. Now, let's say you use wind energy, but it's very difficult to use energy in the city because for wind energy to work, you got to have an average wind speed of at least 5 meters per second. You cannot get that in the middle of where you are now. You cannot get that in the middle of New York. Cannot get it in what? Even though there'll be occasions where there'll be a lot of wind, but it's not consistent enough to generate enough energy, and so that's the second aspect. So we talk about ecology, we talk about people, we talk about water, we talk about materials, we talk about construction, we talk about energy. So these are the 5 key factors that you need to consider in ecological design, ecological planning. Start with nature, start with society, talk about energy, talk about water, you talk about materials and construction. So these are the 5 factors. I have a model for all this, and that, I don't know whether I'll send it to you, but ecological design is how to bring all these together into an organic whole. Now, this is easier said than done. This is the challenge of ecological design. I don't have all the answers to it. I'm still working on it. But this is what all architects should do. So then you look at the education architect. How many schools of architecture teach ecology? Maybe about 2%, 5%. So if you don't teach ecology, how do students learn how to design ecological? How do students learn how to do it an eco-architecture, an eco-master plan? They wouldn't know where to start. So you have to change the curriculum of schools of architecture. So that's the second thing. That's the other thing that you need to consider.
No, very interesting part. But with all of this points that you mentioned, including the misconceptions, then obviously cities have political involvements. There are cultural acceptances. So how does one balance competing priorities like density, infrastructure, and economy while still keeping ecology at the center? How does one do that?
Well, the only way to compare something is look at the metrics, look at the figures, right? And then you have to do a cost benefit analysis that, if I do this, if I build this road here, it'll cost so much, the carbon content so much, the impact on land so much, and establish the metrics. Then you compare what action with the other action. That's the only way you can compare, by metrics. Otherwise, it is just qualitative, not quantitative. No, if you want to buy something, you don't just go to the shop and says, I want this. You compare the cost. Might be cheaper, might be more expensive here. Then you get the metrics before. So if there are a series of factors like density, like building height, like building footprint, about the size of the building, look at the metrics and compare it with alternatives. I usually have 3 alternatives: low, medium, and high. And then you decide. Then becomes a, a judgment, a calculated judgment decision on which option you adopt when you design. So you have options, have options, establish priorities, and then from there you make a decision. Isn't that a normal way for making a decision on anything? Right?
Look at alternatives. Yes, of course. Yes.
Yes, look at alternatives and calculate, quantify it, prioritize, quantify, prioritize, and evaluate the benefits to people and to the environment.
And then make the decision. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Any example you can share of a project where ecological principles significantly improved both the resilience and the livability from your years of work?
Well, for every project now, because I didn't used to do that in the past, now we look at the metrics first. So example for us is the Solaris building in Singapore. It's in the One North district. The building's about 600,000 square feet, so it's about 60,000 square meters. It's quite a reasonably large building. And then the first thing is start with the budget. How much does it cost to build it? And so the main for all building is industry standard for that building type. If it's an office building, there's an industry standard. And so the building, the Solaris building, was built at 6.5% over industry standard. And it was rated, the Singapore has its own green rating system, they call it Green Mark, and it's rated platinum, which is the highest green rating you can get for a building in Singapore. And so we got platinum rating at 6.5 increase in capital cost in the capex. Now, then the client says, why should I pay that? We calculated the energy and cost savings, and we calculate the energy and cost savings amortizes the cost of this capital cost within 5 years. Then after 5 years, you continue to get this cost savings. So that is the main advantage. So have a look at the Solaris building in Singapore. There are other green features. For instance, continuity is very important, ecological continuity, because in nature, everything's connected as much as possible, either on the ground by the vegetation or through the air and through the water and through the natural processes in the climate. In Singapore, we had vegetation. It's not vegetation put all over the building like what a lot of architects do, like some of my imitators and competitors do. The vegetation in Singapore is connected. It's connected in a spiral version from the ground floor all the way up to the top of the building, to the mid-level garden. And that by being connected, it does 4 things. It enables species to migrate within the ecosystem. Secondly, by being connected, you have a larger pool of natural resources to be shared among the species. By having a larger pool of resources, it engenders a much more stable ecosystem. Because if it's separated, then the sustainability of each patch of green is limited. There's no sharing, there's no movement, so big connection within the building. In the Solaris building, we had vegetation that climbs up in a spiral all the way up to the mid-level, then continue all the way up to the roof. And so, connected is a demonstration of how vegetation should be put in buildings. Now, there are people like, for instance, I just shouldn't mention any names, who put vegetation buildings. Well, ecological design isn't just putting vegetation in buildings. Ecological design is about designing buildings like living systems, like the ecosystem. If you study ecology, then you realize the ecosystem is not just it's a interaction between biotic constituents, which is the organic aspects of building, and the abiotic acting together to form a whole. So if you put them in disparate patches, there's no integration, it doesn't work as a whole. And so the holistic property of a design is extremely important. This is what differentiates an organic system, a living system, and a machine. A living system as a whole has a holistic property. That means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Whereas machine, if something goes wrong, you just take the part out, you replace it, put it back in again. But as a human being, if there's something wrong with your arm, you cannot cut it off and replace it. You can replace it with prosthetic, but it will never be the same again. And so the fundamental differences between living systems and machine systems, and that is something that we need, that is a crucial aspect of ecological design.
Very well said. I'm getting to learn a lot through this process as well.
Well,
And
do I
so
get
just
paid for it?
a different perspective, obviously there are I'm sure bigger challenges in adding ecological design to large scale projects. Love to know some of the large biodiversity or integrating biodiversity into urban spaces so that it's both functional and beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Well, biodiversity is a crucial factor in ecological design. And so biodiversity, we start by looking at the latitude that you're in, okay? The highest latitude, the highest level of biodiversity is within the equatorial zone. It is a lot, the density, the vegetation is very dense, it's very high level of vegetation. As we head towards the temperate and towards the cold climate and towards the Arctic, the level of biodiversity decreases. So we should try and keep the biodiversity level as much as we can. And then we should understand the biodiversity at different latitude and try and enhance and to make the ecosystem perform much better with a high level of diversity in as much as we can. Now, it's not just putting species into building up, putting plants, because you got to be very careful that you don't put, is make sure the species are what I call endemic species, species that are particular to that locality and that will survive and live that locality without being invasive. Now, that is the biggest problem because people just think, oh, I put, particular plant in because I like the way it looks. I put a vegetable because flowers with that. But that species, if it's invasive, can destroy the ecosystem in totality. It's not just floral species, but also, faunal species. You bring pets from another locality and bring it to your city. It changes, it reproduces, it changes the ecology of the ecosystem of that locality. And there's so many examples of this happening, where you bring certain types of rabbits, certain types of foxes, of certain types of species, because they look beautiful, they're nice pets, but when they escape or when they go into the wildland, they reproduce and they are because they could be dominant species. They can destroy the ecosystem of the locality. So we have to make sure the species we bring in to any location to enhance its biodiversity are not invasive species.
Yes. All right. No, understood. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So, a couple of points I want to check with you. So, from all these projects that you've done in Asia and Europe, uh, what can developing countries do and adopt these ecological planning without driving costs? What would be your advice to them? How can they do it?
Well, as I said, the methodology is important. Um, as in my books, I describe, the step by step how we go about doing it. It's too much to explain within, a few minutes to you. But they have to start with the mindset that you have to do something about the environment. If you dismiss it, then there's no discussion, right? But
Yeah.
if you believe that something has to be done about the environment for that particular project, then we have a methodology for doing it. You look, as I said, you look at the site, look at the build, you look at it in terms of the environment. What is it? Then you look at the system. What is it? You look at the inputs of the system. What takes place within the system? What is output of the system? How things are the cycle is closed. So there is factor to be considered. I've written 12 books on this. I spent my
Wow.
whole life working on this. And so, each book improves on the other one. And somebody said to me, oh, you've written 12 books, Ken. Do you have any more to say? I says, well, every time I write a book, it is an improvement on the previous one. It adds new things. It then pushes things forward a little bit. And so I'm constantly what I call practicing what the Japanese call kaizen, which is continuous improvement, a continuous improvement in my thinking, continuous the work I'm working, continuous the work that I'm designing, continuously improve the way I am writing. And so this is with every book I write, I push forward, the thinking previously, If I had been wrong before, I dismiss it and I say, I'm very sorry, I'm wrong. And so this is something that I do all the time, with every project, with every book that I write.
Fantastic. So on that Kaizen principle, what and how, I mean, how do you look at the cities for the future? And how would you see that changing over time, leveraging the ecological principles? So just a quick overview would be helpful. I know it's such a big topic.
Well, as I said, you start with ecology. Ecology means you look at the biosphere, the biogeochemical cycles. You look at the locality's ecosystem, look at the species is flora and fauna, and then you see how you can enhance it. And if it's already degraded or damaged, you have to think how you can regenerate and repair and make it back what it was before. And so, or in as much as possible, if that's a desirable objective. So that's what we need to do. And so it's what in management terms called situational. Every situation is different. You have to adopt the right strategy for that particular situation. Before you adopt strategy, you have to understand the condition, then you adopt strategy. And so if you keep doing this and you learn something all the time, then you are constantly improving the way you design, the way you work. So that's how you apply Kaizen to ecological design.
Perfect. Excellent. And if there was one message you wanted to give to people in general, including the young architects, what would that be?
Study ecology, not just
Understand it. Yeah.
understand, and not just, it's never too late. You should start with education, start with children, and teach them, what are the good habits and what are the principles. And so they will continue to develop this, teach your students, not just in architecture, but in all subjects. I mean, there's a very famous writer called Jane Jacobs. I don't know if you heard of her. One of her
Yeah.
books, she talks about the ecology of economics. So it applies to all subjects. And if you apply ecology to all subjects, then the world becomes a better place for
Good.
all of us.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. Dr. Ken, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Very insightful. I learned a lot myself. I'm sure the audience who will watch this will also learn a lot. We will provide, of course, a lot of details to them about how they might be able to connect with you. And I hope those conversations will continue. But I wanted to thank you personally and once again congratulate you on receiving the Frost and Sullivan Institute Visionary Leadership Recognition. Thank you, and I wish you the absolute best.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye now.